50 years at its Henrietta campus, another milestone for Rochester Institute of Technology. A golden anniversary from a golden opportunity more than a half-century prior to vacate cramped quarters downtown and occupy 1,300 acres of available farmland. Today, RIT is practically a city unto itself, a community devoted to academic excellence, which welcomes more than 19,000 students to campus each year from across the globe. Hello, I'm Don Alhart. As we celebrate this proud milestone, it makes sense to step back and ask, how did we get here? I am joined by the men responsible for leading RIT through much of that evolution. For me, it's a welcome opportunity to reprise a familiar role, having moderated a gathering of past university presidents on 2 previous occasions, back in 1992 and again in 2003. Now I'm honored to introduce the current leader of RIT, David Munson, who became RIT's 10th president last year. His predecessor, Bill Dessler, joins us as well, president from 2007 to 2017. Also with us is Al Simone, president from 1992 to 2007, and Richard Rose, president from 1979 to 1992. Gentlemen, it is wonderful having all of you gathered here today so we can reflect on where RIT has been and perhaps look forward to where it is going in the future as well. President Munson, why don't we begin with you and then we'll go back and trace the history a little bit. But you've been here more than a year now. I think it's fair to share what your impressions are and some of the challenges you see as you assume this role.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So the name Rochester Institute of Technology is actually a little bit of a misnomer in that the Institute is about much more than technology. Very strong programs in art and design that are kind of blended together with the technology. And in addition, we have colleges of business, health sciences, and liberal arts. And so one of my first observations that this is a complete university. Another thing is that RIT is so well known for creativity and innovation. We attract the types of students and faculty that have ideas and they want to act out on those ideas.
We go back to President Rose back in the 1970s and all the way up to 1992. Campus itself, just 10 years old when you were here. So you observed that transition from downtown to here, but now, of course, a lot of the challenges here. As you began that career here at RIT, what were the challenges you saw then and where did you hope to take it?
Well, first, they didn't pave any sidewalks for a couple of years when they moved out here. The theory being that they would figure out where the students were walking and then pave it. Consequently, there was mud on every building. All the carpets were, and it was, Paul Miller would go on for days about that. But my first impression was, number one, there was no chapel. A spiritual dimension is necessary for a complete education, so that was our first building. And we had to have a place for weddings and for people to identify with RIT, because their identification was with their fraternity or their sorority, not the institution. So we wanted to get that, well, alumni giving was extremely low, 7%, so it did gradually bump up, but that was a necessary building. The second thing was that we didn't have the RIT tagger visible on the campus. And so we had a little contest, and a person at Genesee Brewery was a sculptor, and he made the RIT tagger, and they put it out on the walkway. And I thought that was a necessary identification. And the third thing we did was May Day became a celebration. We dismissed classes and we planted trees. You know, the students understood what we were trying to do. We're trying to soften the campus. And they were all part of that. And they had good suggestions.
Did you have a particular focus? Obviously the tech studies were much of what you brought, but was there, as you look back, 1 or 2 things that kind of you identify your time here with?
Well, RIT, we started a microelectronics program, but we had all the basic elements here. We had good electrical engineering, we had printing, we had photography. We did not have a material science program for the substrates, but that was easy to substitute. So it was not difficult for Dick Kenyon, who was the Dean of Engineering, who really spearheaded the microelectronics program, and it was very successful. It was a program that was needed in industry at the time.
When I look back to the news coverage of Al Simone coming here, the first question you probably got, and the one that everyone asks, you're at the University of Hawaii. You are familiar with Rochester and all of its weather. Why in the world would you give up Hawaii to come to Rochester, New York?
Well, there are a number of reasons. Prime among them is, in a sense, it was like coming home. Yeah. The first 15 years of my academic life in Boston, Massachusetts. Another major reason was the culture and the opportunity that I saw at RIT. The things that Paul Miller and Bill and Ellingson before me had built. There was a sense of history here. There was a sense of we can do it. There was change. I like to take risks. I'm kind of a, you know me. So, I don't gamble, but calculated risks are important. And here, School of Printing, you mentioned School of Photography, number one in the country. Rich brought in the PhD program in imaging science. That was a plus for me. It's like I had the same battle in Hawaii. I said, this is terrific. He's even got that good. He's taken all the hits. So I can come in and take some of the advantages of that. And so the opportunity that I saw at that time that says, hey, we could make progress, we can move up.
And when I look at your presidency, that seemed to be the beginning of a realization that you wanted to go beyond the campus on a personal basis, that your connection to the community would be beneficial to RIT, because you really seem to expand your personal involvement in many things here.
Well, I felt that was very important, particularly because of what RIT was. I mean, the idea that with that co-op program, and as I said, that was a really big attraction for me. What is the co-op program? It's community. It's bringing the community in to look at our students before they even graduate and helping their educational process. And when those students come back, they help to educate our faculty too, because of what they learn out in industry.
We'll move on to President Dessler and moving into that early 2000s, 2007 to 2017. Talk a little bit about the creation of that Imagine RIT, the Innovation and Creativity Festival. What brought that to being, and what were the benefits that you saw in that?
In large measure, the reason for the Imagine RIT project, I was very attracted to RIT because of the balance of programs, as he mentioned, between engineering, science, computing technology, especially business and the like, but also the fine arts, the arts, and industrial design. I thought that that combination of programs gave RIT a kind of unfair advantage. I've always looked for unfair advantages whenever I've been leading institutions, and I thought this was an unfair one, because it's rather rare to have excellence in all of those areas, especially with design, which is where art and function meet. And so I got interested in the idea that RIT, if fertilized properly, could become a real center of innovation and creativity. And so when I first actually interviewed for the job, I presented this idea of having an annual festival to show off the innovative nature of our community and to show off to the world what could come out of a place like this. And of course, I was astonished by how well it all went over. In fact, I say it was a sort of a silly idea by a president that was turned into a great idea by a few hundred people. But nevertheless, it really came out of that idea that we did have an unfair advantage in our program mix, and that we could exploit that. And sure enough, the public, not just regionally, but also nationally and among our alumni base, started to take pride in our ability in those areas.
When you talk about regionally and nationally, we have to talk about globally as well, because it was in the early years really the expansion in China and Dubai and Kosovo. What prompted that, and what have you realized from it in terms of benefits for the campus here?
Well, I've always felt that you can't be a really prominent university moving into the current century without being an international university in more ways than one. And that has to include more than just bringing in international students. you also have to have some feet on the ground internationally to be able to reflect and benefit from the interactions that those kinds of programs can bring.
When I look over the presidencies from the news coverage point of view, when I look at Al Simone and I look at your presidencies, and I don't mean this to the deference of anyone else, but I sense a real involvement with the students, an effort to get out of the office and get to the students. I go back to Mark Ellingson back in 1992 when we all sat down. And he prided himself on knowing every student. Well, back then it was a little easier to do that. But it was a student focus, and when Richard talked about, seeing where the students walk before you put the sidewalks in. But when I look at yours and Al's particularly, even those first days out in the golf carts or wherever it was, there seemed to be that effort to connect with the students and see some real benefits to that.
Well, first of all, it's a lot of fun. Second of all, every president has to choose to some extent what he spends his time on, or she spends her time on. And I did choose, quite soberly, to spend some time with students. I felt that probably could be beneficial because we were struggling with some retention and graduation issues, and I wanted to make the place seem like a friendly place, and I didn't want students to have only a contractual relationship with the university. But that does come at the cost of other things. I could have spent more time on the road raising money. So there are ways in which all presidents have to make choices in these areas, and the expectations of some of the people who run the university, like the Board of Trustees, might be different than a particular president wants to choose. And so I do think that we all make these choices, and we benefit from having different presidents come in who take a little bit different emphasis as they move through the job.
President Munson, obviously a chance to hear these gentlemen today, but I know you have talked to each one of them individually, and I'm curious, as you begin a new job, create your own identity and establish yourself, but the curiosity to see what motivated them, what moved them, what worked, what didn't work. What kind of describe that process for us? Because I think people would be interested to know what you try to accumulate before you move forward.
Yeah, well, certainly I'm building on the foundation laid by these three gentlemen and their predecessors, and Bill Dessler and I have had a pretty extensive conversation about why each of us came to this institution, and it was for exactly the same reasons, and we had sort of exactly the same opportunities in front of us in terms of what we might do in our future, and we both chose to come here to RIT. And so I feel like what I'm doing is building on the foundation that's been laid, and not just putting the foot on the accelerator in creativity and innovation, but which Bill had already done, but trying to really use that in a purposeful way in terms of attracting specific types of students and specific types of faculty members, and then providing the opportunities that those creative students really want.
Coming up, some insights on what's in store for the university over the next 50 years when RIT Presidential Reflections continues.
At RIT, we are a rich tapestry of unique mindsets. Our backgrounds are as varied as our interests and talents. Yet there's one thing we all see: possibility. Now, we are accelerating our journey toward greatness, fostering unbridled creativity, limitless innovation, and boundless imagination. We nurture engaged global citizens, bringing goodness to the world. With labs that advance cutting-edge learning, we are pushing into uncharted territory. This is our time. And together, we will transform the future. by transforming RIT.
I'll go back to Al for a moment, because back in 2003, I was looking at the interview we did when we all sat down, and I'm looking at my notes now, and you kind of made a football analogy that Mark Ellingson put us on the field.
You know, and then Paul got us to the 50-yard line, and Rich got us to the 80-yard line, and I'm going to try to get us to the 95-yard line. And
you would hope within the next 10 years we would have crossed the goal line. So I just have to go back and see if you're in your football analogy where you put RIT on the field at this point.
Well, here's what I've done. I've reinvented the NFL, and it's going to be a 120-yard field for this. And so I think I brought it to the 100-yard line, but there's 20 more yards to go. Yeah. And I'm counting on Bill and you know, Dave and the people that follow them for taking the ball all the way in.
Yeah, and in terms of football, I often get asked, why not reinstate a football program? And frankly, if it weren't for the problem with concussions, I would probably be personally interested in doing that, but I'd like to see that sorted out before we contemplate a return to that sport.
Sometimes presidents get confronted with problems that they didn't expect to have come when they took the job. Changing semesters was one of them. That was certainly not on my agenda when I came, but I wasn't also planning to build a hockey arena either. And but the teams did me in. You know, the men went to the Frozen Four one year, and then I think the next year the women won the national championship in D3. And there was a tremendous amount of enthusiasm locally in the community for what this meant to our community to have a strong D1 hockey program. And so we began a campaign to build an arena.
So our plan is to, over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, to try to raise $15 million to be the cornerstone funding for a new hockey arena at RIT.
We'll be able to bring in the best teams from around the country to RIT because they're going to want to play in this facility.
Has technology kind of opened that door for these alliances? We talked a little bit, Bill, about the Rochester Regional Health Alliance, for example.
Well, that's an interesting one. You know, sometimes these ideas become kind of obvious the more you take on the job. You know, health science started moving in what I thought was RIT's direction. The decoding of the human genome made it more of an information science. The emergence of robotics and telemedicine and the like meant this entire field was becoming more and more a field in which we could play with existing assets and then gradually add other programs and other faculty capabilities. We actually started some discussions with the Rochester Regional Health System about a partnership there because they actually provide access to actual clinical experiences for our students and to some extent clinical trials and tests for research products that come out of our research programs. And so we needed a partner like that to actually build up a credible program in that area. That's gone fairly well, and I think that there's still a lot of opportunity there.
And does that kind of fit into the strategic plan that we see for RIT?
Well, there are a lot of elements of the strategic plan. We got it broken down into 4 basic dimensions: people, programs, places, and partnerships. On the people side, it's really about attracting in a very intentional way the most creative and multi-talented students and faculty, and we have a number of ideas there that we're going to be putting into play. Including, we're going to be attracting more and more students who are #1 in their high school in the performing arts. And maybe they're not going to major in, say, musical theater as an undergrad, but they want a high-level experience, and maybe they're going to major in computer science. Well, come to RIT, because we'll offer that. And then in terms of programs, part of it has to do with experiential learning. So RIT historically has been strong in multiple components of experiential learning, especially with our cooperative education program. But in that whole bailiwick, we also add in international programs, entrepreneurship, research, service to the local community, and also activities in student groups and societies. And we're now going to be offering this as a whole suite of programs to our students top of mind that if all you do is go to class and get good grades, maybe you received half an education. But here's where you get the other half. And we're even talking about the possibility of instituting a requirement for a number of these experiential type learning opportunities that they would be undertaken by our students. On the faculty side, the program is more scholarship, more research, more discovery. And that will certainly benefit our students, but it'll also benefit the nation and the world. And we also have facilities in mind that will be appearing in the coming years on our campus to support the programs and the people that I'm talking about.
An interesting footnote. When I got here, we had no music on the campus at all. None. So it first started at NTID.
Yes.
And I asked Bill Castle, who was then the director, can you form a chorus throughout the institution? And he did. And so we had, the first music was from NTID, and they had the better performing auditorium by far.
Yeah, they have the best auditorium on campus, and it's great that you brought up NTID, Rich, because that's one of the jewels in the crown of RIT. It helps make our campus unique. So NTID, of course, is the National Technical Institute for the Deaf. Was established about 50 years ago. We just celebrated the 50th anniversary this year. We had thousands of alums back for that. And it really is a tremendous service to that community. But having those students on our campus is tremendously enriching for the rest of the university.
I think the benefit is to the hearing student.
Yeah, there's a lot of benefit to the hearing student.
And I'm not sure most people on the outside realize the accommodations that are made. We talk about interpreters for any class at any time. It was a real challenge to embrace that to begin with, I would think.
Bill pointed out it really enriches the education for everybody, including the presidents. We had to learn sign language. And in our commencement addresses, we signed our commencement addresses. And we learned about the culture, and the people made friends, and it enhanced, we're not students, but we learned.
I do wonder what we said sometimes.
Well, I used to tell you. No, they said I wanted to use some words that weren't in the dictionary, so I had to finger spell it. Well, after a while, it gets so boring. It took forever. So I just said, oh, this is a word. Make up a sign and promote it. And so I added to that. We added to that dictionary nationwide.
I would suspect for you personally to try to sign as fast as you speak would be the biggest challenge.
We had Bob Hope here a couple of times because of Eisenhower College, and he continued supporting. But in the ice arena, he performed. And he said, it's the only place I've ever performed with an echo chamber, because we had interpreters down in front of the deaf students, and they would laugh at the joke 30 seconds later.
Well, let's look ahead as we close this out to the next 50 years for RIT. And as Alice kind of reintroduced, I guess the 120-yard line now that we look at. But where do each of you see RIT in the next half century?
I think RIT will become the premier institution in this country for innovation, for new ideas, new technology, because it's inviting that kind of student. And I think that your development with the performing arts and that dimension of a student has the potential for changing the culture of the institution. And I think RIT will be a shining jewel in the future.
I'd like to piggyback on that and support everything that Rich just said. We have that category of one idea that I had, that we looked at all the universities around, and Division I, however you want to call them, big, small, large, doctoral, whatever, and where do we fit in? And we did our strategic plan, vision, mission, goals, objectives, action steps, agenda for action to monitor and evaluate the action steps. And the question is, what if all these pieces come together? What will we look like, and where will we fit? And the conclusion we came to today was we don't fit in any of this. And you group them any way you want to group them. Put all those things together, and there's about a dozen of them in our plan. You'll have 2 dozen probably. You put those all together, and if they work, no other university has been able to make them all work in that the way that we're talking about. And I think we can make it work. I think you know, Paul set the stage for Rich, who set it for me, and I tried to put a platform for Bill. He's taken it the next step, and now we have Dave. Dave probably, I don't know if you can do it in 10 years, but you can get us to like the 18-yard line or something.
The 18?
Yeah.
Wow, that's generous.
Pressure. Well, we had a strategic plan called Greatness Through Difference, which actually followed the category of one. And in fact, we did recognize that RIT is kind of a special place, and why not try to take advantage of our unfair advantages and move the university forward? I think the sky's the limit, to be honest with you. I think if you look at institutions like Carnegie Mellon or even Dartmouth, we have some of the flavor of those institutions, and I think that it's very easy to imagine that in another 50 years we will be thought of in the same way as those institutions are today. They're very strong in both the right side and left side of the brain, we like to say. They choose their PhD programs carefully, especially Dartmouth. I think that there's a lot of ways in which we can use them as aspirational peers, but I think also within 50 years, I think we can be thought of in exactly the same way that they are.
Yeah, I agree with everything I've just heard. I think in the future, RIT will become one of the top universities in the entire nation, but unlike any other university. We have no ambition to copy anybody else. For us, it's all about creativity and innovation in every discipline, and in pulling down the barriers between disciplines. So if a student is majoring in one discipline, they've got room in their curriculum and maybe even the motivation and certainly the interest to cross boundaries and learn from different fields, assemble it all together, go out and do something magnificent in the world.
I thank you all again for sharing your insights as we look back and look ahead to RIT.
It's an exciting thing to watch.
Yeah.
It's exciting years.
Well, I'm humbled and honored to have sat down with every president of this institution and shared these thoughts, and I look forward to sharing them again on the 120-yard line.
Right.